All righty. So today's mini lesson is similar to what we did yesterday with graphing, except now instead of having equations with graphs in just this first quadrant, remember we talked about the quadrants? This is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 3. Exactly, right? It goes counterclockwise. So instead of all of our graphs being just in this quadrant, maybe it could be, in this quadrant here, or it's cutting across multiple quadrants, all right? So this is where most of our lines are going to exist, all right? And you're going to see how we're going to be plugging in different values into our equations now to help us evaluate. You have to choose those values to plug in, but there's a little bit of strategy behind it. Remember, Ms. Smith yesterday brought up the fact that it's easier to plug in values like 0, 1, 2, and 3 because they're easier numbers to work with. But what happens when we have a fraction? What happens when we have a decimal? How does that change what we plug in? All right. So the first equation we're going to graph is y equals negative x. Remember our process from yesterday. We take x values, we plug them in, we see what it gives us as a y value, and then we plot that point, right? The way that we plot our points, we go to the right or to the left first, and then up or down. Is everybody familiar with that idea? Everything that we discussed yesterday. Okay. First example, if I have y equals negative x, well, this is the same thing as negative 1 times x, right? So if I were to plug in 0, this is really just negative 1 times 0. And what's negative 1 times 0? What's anything times 0? 0. So I have the point 0, 0. All right. So I'm going to plot that. Remember, 0, 0 is my origin where I don't move to the right or left or up and down. I just plot it right there where my x and y axis meet. Do you remember seeing that? Do you remember talking about that either in here or in a previous class? Now what I'm going to do is plug in 1. So see how I'm plugging in some of these easier values to work with. What's negative 1 times positive 1? Negative. What did you say? I didn't hear you. Yeah, negative 1. All right. So I have the point 1, negative 1. Where's that point going to be located? If I start from the origin, which is where you should start from all your points, where do I go first to plot this? So to the right 1, and then where? So do I go up 1 if it's negative or down 1? Down 1, right? This is my negative y-axis. So this is my positive y, positive x. This is my negative y, negative x. Okay. So anything that's positive, I move to the right and up. Anything that's negative, I move to the left and down. Is everybody familiar with that? Any questions about that idea? The last one I'm going to plug in is 2. What's negative 1 times 2? Negative 2. All right. So when I plot this point, where do I go to start? To the right 2, and then where? Down 2. So now my graph actually goes across what 2 quadrants? What quadrant's this here? 2. What quadrant's this down here? 4. Good. So we're getting out of just plotting everything in quadrant 1. Does that make sense to everybody? Same steps apply. Same steps apply where I plug in values. I find out what my y is, and I plot those points, except now my points could be anywhere in my coordinate plane. All right. Any questions about that idea? Everybody good? All right. I want to take a quick pause for a second. Just want to show you something. Say I had a fraction like 1/2. What's the reciprocal of 1/2? 2, what's that? Not 2/4. Did you say 2/4? So that would be 1/2 again. So I'm looking for, if I flip my fraction, what's the reciprocal? That's what reciprocal means. So 2/1, right? And if I multiply something by its reciprocal, what do I get? What happens to this 2 and this 2? Well, No? It's all right. You're okay. They cross simplify, right? I can cancel them out. They both become ones. So this is just one. If you have two halves, what does that make? That's what we just did. If you have 4 quarters, what's that? It's $1, right? Which is just one. Does that make sense? If you have 10 dimes, how much is that? It's $1, right? Which is just one. So you're taking 1/10, multiplying it by the reciprocal. So for example, if I had 1/3, what's the reciprocal of 1/3? 3/1. And if I multiply 1/3 by 3/1, what do I get? 1. So I get whatever that value is that's up here. Does that make sense? What if it was 1/16? So the reciprocal is 16. And if I multiply 1/16 by 16, what do I get? Okay, we all understand that idea. Multiply by reciprocal because it leaves me with a whole number, which is just 1. Okay. We can apply this to fractions still if I'm graphing. So there's going to be times where you need to be strategic about the numbers that you choose to plug in. If you plug in 0, 1, and 2 with a fraction, you'd have 0, 2/3. If you plug in 2, you have 4/3. It's not easy to plot those points on your XY plane, right? Because these all work in numbers of 1. They're all structured, so these are all 1 apart, correct? Does that make sense? Everybody follow that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in values to get rid of my fraction. All right. First one is 0. What's 2/3 times 0? What's anything times 0? 0. So I have the point 0, 0 to start, just like I did before. So that's 0. But now what I'm going to do is plug in the value 3. The reason that I'm doing that is just like what we did with the reciprocal. What's going to happen with this 3 here and this 3 here? They're going to cancel. And what am I left with up top? 2 over, which is just 2. So it leaves me with a whole number. So now I have the point 32. What if I did 2/3 times 6? What happens with this 3 and this 6? How do they simplify? What's 6 divided by 3? So this becomes a 1 and this becomes a 2. What's 2 times 2? So I'm picking numbers to plug in so I get whole numbers out in the end. Does that make sense? So like, for example, if I had 3 halves, what should I multiply 3 halves by to get rid of the 2? Any ideas? Okay, so 0 would work. What else could work to get rid of that 2 in my denominator? 2. What else? Not 3. 4. What else? 6. 10, 12. You see, so it's all factors that, just like here, it was 3 and it was 6. What would come next? I want to have to pick another point. 9. What about the next one? 12, 15, 18, so on and so forth. See what I mean? So it eliminates or it simplifies easier for us. So we have whole number points to plot. Okay. Does everybody follow that? So if you see a fraction like on your Alex assignment today, plug in points so they eliminate and you can get those values. Oh, okay. In the beginning? Oh, you did it and you didn't see a fraction. Okay. Well, just in case. Still a good idea. It's still something that we need to know. So now we're going to plot these points. I have 0, 0, 3, 2. Where do I start plotting the point 3, 2? Where do I go? To the right or to the left? So this way, 3, and then where? up 2. The point 6,4, where do I go from here? Over 6, up 4. Now, when I draw my line, what quadrant is this in? What 2 quadrants? 1 and 3. Good. So we're getting a good review of quadrants. We're getting a good review of plugging in values. We're getting a good review of finding those values for X's and Y's, plotting points, drawing lines, the whole thing. It's kind of all coming together from what we talked about, not only with equations, but now with graphing, and getting a good review of pretty much everything that we know. All right. Any questions about either of these 2 examples? Okay. Well, then with that being said, for the remaining part of the class